This episode of the podcast is brought to you by J.D. Chapman Insurance Agency. Are you an aspiring business owner or entrepreneur looking to be part of New York's multi-billion-dollar cannabis industry? If so, the decisions you make in these early stages are imperative to your future success. And I'll tell you from personal experience that you will face risk on a daily basis. So it's important to have a comprehensive insurance program in place with a trusted, reliable partner. J.D. Chapman offers special insurance for cannabis growers, medical and adult use dispensaries, edibles manufacturers, testing labs, ancillary businesses, and more. Available coverage includes general liability, product liability, excess liability, and workers' comp. In this exciting and rapidly growing industry, it's important to have a partner you can trust. Contact J.D. Chapman today at 315-986-4062 for all your cannabis insurance needs. J.D. Chapman, from seed to sale, they have you covered.
The views and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the views of any outside institutions unless explicitly stated.
What's up, everyone? My name is Steve Vanderwall, and I'm the host of Cannabis Cum Laude, a podcast devoted entirely to cannabis. This podcast will cover a full spectrum of topics, including cultivation, business, medicine, politics, culture, advocacy, and everything in between. Because let's face it, the cannabis industry is very complicated. It's robust, and it has a ton of moving parts. So it's going to be my job to help you understand it a little bit better. So tune in every week for a brand new episode. And if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. And if you really like the show and are interested in sponsoring, please shoot me an email at logistics@cannabiscumlaude.com. Now enjoy the show. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude. I'm here with my good buddy, Brian Lane, compliance officer for No Wave, a hopefully soon to be licensed cannabis processor in the great state of New York.
Yeah, we certainly hope.
That's exciting, right?
Mm-hmm. Exciting times.
Probably a lot of work.
Oh, man. Since 2018.
But you've been prepping with hemp a lot, you know?
Yep.
Do you feel that you're where you should be?
That's a good question. I actually think we are exactly where we should be. With the way the state, everything's rolling out, you learn things kind of as they're writing it because they're just writing and releasing so fast. The latest regs, obviously, was the application for the processors. Mm-hmm. It looks like there's maybe 33 possibly eligible on the last list that I've seen with the state, somewhere between 20 and 33. And as I read all the regulations, really being GMP compliant set us up to be prepared for how the language is spelled out in the provisional adult use processor terms and conditions that we'll have to follow for the first 2 years of the conditional licensing.
What are some of the things that really stood out to you in the T's and C's, the terms and conditions?
T's and C's. That's interesting. I'll have to remember that. Man. Well, they're definitely going to be coming on site before you start using. You'll complete your application. And then the reporting responsibilities that they're laying out is very much within GMP compliance. It's about keeping record keeping for 5 years. It's about tracking everything you can see to sale. There's so many different ways to say that.
Sure.
But they do detail that you have to have a quality control plan. And every GMP facility will already have that in place, which is nice. So when they started this hemp research program, they did it better than any other state when they pretty much mandated you had to be GMP certified. At first, it was the first year in 2019, I think we had a kitchen audit because we were just R&D'ing one product out of a small space. But at that point, they never really said exactly what kind of audit you needed. They said you had to be GMP certified. So we did. We went through the process with an auditing agency. And then the next year, we got our ASI, dietary supplement, which is that pretty much highest stage you can get. And then we made sure all the protocols are in place since 2019. So even that little kitchen audit I did, I would have been prepared for the dietary supplement audit then. And to me, what that does is it protects the consumer. at the end of the day, this whole thing, everybody's talking about processors and cultivators and dispensary owners and social equity people. But at the end of the day, all we're going to do is reward consumers that voted and pushed this through. So now we got to give them quality products. And to me, I think the best way to do that is through some level of GMP, maybe dietary supplement, maybe a little bit overkill. But at the end of the day, what you do with a GMP audit is you're verifying all of your vendors. You're verifying where all of your ingredients come from. You're verifying all your contractors. You're having people sign into your facility. Nobody can come in and grab labels off a shelf on you and go make their own product on the side. So you're actually tracking all of your inventory, which you want. You don't want to have where you're a cultivator, for instance, and you're doing a small processing of your flour and pre-rolls. You don't want your packaging laying out so some kids down the street can grab a bunch of them when nobody's paying attention. And next thing you know, you got at a school, some of your packaging is being used to package to some 16-year-olds or 18-year-olds at a local high school. So I get the structure, rigidity of it, right?
And when you think about food, say there's a salmonella outbreak in peanut butter or something, it's like, okay, track. Nowadays with tech and text messaging, there was just a peanut butter recall for salmonella, and we were on that list. I was through about 3/4 of the jar by the time I found out, and I lived to tell the tale. But my point is that within who knows how long between recognizing where it came from, use that seed to sale tracking, and then now with mass messaging, hey, by the way, it looks like you are involved in that, check your number, and what do you know, we were on that. So, I think with cannabis going online, there's no reason we shouldn't be following in those same footsteps, especially, cannabis being clean. It's I think when it comes to, it could be potency, dosing, contaminants aside, I think if you put out a 5 milligram gummy or something and it goes out as a 30 or a 50, maybe that's not likely, but it could happen. And all of a sudden, people are taking way too much. And, I do think that the seed to sale tracking is going to be, from a public health perspective, really strong.
If we look at the biggest market right now is California. It's kind of a wild west out there. Everybody wants to talk about and reference California, but anytime anybody brings up different adult use industries to me, I kind of separate out California from the rest of the country, because you pretty much can do anything in California, and a lot of that is seeping out of California now, unfortunately, because of that. So Michigan's the number 2 market, but once once us processors get up and running, and as many people as follow up with these 203 farmers that have been approved now, and now we'll have the list of processors that'll be, so that's 2/3 of the way through. So we're gonna have products starting to be created here probably August in the state, getting ready for the dispensaries. They're going to be opening up more than likely probably January, February, in my opinion. Now I believe there will be one open in November. Here's my one thing that my prediction is. I'm going to predict there's one dispensary open before the election.
Yeah, Greg Procton, who I just had on the last episode. What's up, Greg? He literally said the same thing. We're like, everyone loves a good ribbon cutting ceremony before the election. I tend to agree with you.
And I think that's a good thing for the state, though. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think all of us in the industry understood how long it takes to write regulations, and not only to go from the legislation to the actual regulations, for them to put actually in place this provisional for this first 2 years. I think it's actually very forward thinking in the state, because and I've heard it said before by OCM members, we're kind of the guinea pigs a little bit, which is fine. I actually like it. I looked at the processor application on Tuesday and yesterday and been studying it again to hopefully complete it within the next couple days. And I like to see the thoroughness of it. They were asking the right questions. I saw maybe a couple statements that might be overlapped, or a couple things maybe we're going to need some clarity on, such as certain concentrates that are going to be allowed. Definitely need to have more verification of what certain concentrates mean, because we all know that there's many definitions of that.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they separated out cartridges and disposables and then listed specifically how those could be made and what kind of devices they could be made on, including how much recyclable material has to be in and the type of materials they have to be made with. I love that they did that. And so I really think that there was a lot of thorough points put into the legislation for the processors that will protect consumers and make it good for tracking and easy to make products. To be honest, cartridges and disposables, for instance, you're pretty much only can put in distillate or cannabinoids that wouldn't crash out, and cannabis derived terpenes. That's it. They're not going to allow synthetics. They're not going to allow botanically derived terpenes. It states right in the regulations. So
So it has to be cannabis-derived terpenes?
yep. And I'm sure hemp is going to be under that because cannabis is hemp, right? It's a
Yeah,
synonym
yeah.
in
Interesting.
many, right? So I'll actually. So this is the what's permitted. Adult use cannabis product types that are going to be permitted starting this year, everybody. So when you go to dispensaries, these are the products you're going to be able to look at, or for, excuse me, topicals, which will be a max of 1,000 milligrams per topical. That's also in the regs. Edibles, including beverages, and that will be with a 5 milligram per serving, 100 milligram maximum per container.
So that means if you're a gummy maker, you're getting 25 milligram gummies, right? Because the serving
Correct.
size is 1, and then you get up to 100. So you
So
would
20
pieces.
individual chewables inside that container at
Yep.
5 milligrams each.
Okay.
That's correct. Yep. So a total of 100 would be the most.
Okay.
And I'm sure what they're doing is trying to reduce the potential consumption of children. It seems like
Sure.
this is all what this is guidance around,
Sure.
which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. I think it might be overkill.
Yeah.
To me, honestly, and what I've been studying and learning about the entourage effect, much research is coming through talking about 2-to-1 for an entourage effect, with the THC and CBD being the best for your body. And from what I have gathered through many people coming out and speaking about edibles now in the last year around New York State, is a lot of people fall within that 5 to 15 range. 5 milligram to 15 is being good for them. So I was hoping the state would default to 10 milligrams, to be very honest, because I thought that would be very easy to make an entourage product that really could benefit consumers.
Sure.
So we will just have to make sure there will be a process afforded to us by the state that if we want to put higher milligram totals per serving into a product, they
fair.
potentially will approve that. So
Okay.
they're giving us
Probably
an avenue
within
to at
reason.
least. Yep.
Right? You can't make
show
a
it.
1,000 milligram, or maybe you can. But
Yep.
Like you had mentioned earlier, there's there's tax things, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But sorry.
No,
continue
you're
your
good.
point.
No,
Yeah.
there's so many different ways to go, folks. So we can go off on a lot of tangents for certain.
How
but
much
I
time
do-
you got?
Yeah. Certain concentrates is actually the actual wording in it, which is great. We know concentrates will be allowed. That's also going to be higher milligram dosage than the 100 they're talking about. But with the cartridges they're going to allow, that's going to be a higher percentage, because that's going to be about 90, probably anywhere from 60 to 95%. I would say THC in cartridges, and they're going to allow that. They didn't put a cap on that from what we saw. And then tinctures will be allowed, capsules will be allowed, tablets, cannabis flower products, including but not limited to whole flower, shake and pre-rolls, and any other product type or form with prior written approval of the office in determining whether or not to approve the new cannabis product type. You cannot contain liquor, wine, beer, cider. It cannot be put in with tobacco or nicotine.
Question: It can't be combined, but can you make it under one roof? Can you manufacture alcohol, tobacco, and nicotine under one roof?
No, it's very specific that if you have a THC processing company, you can have a hemp processing company on the same site. But they also state a sentence a little bit later on that we have to have written procedures in place to track and ensure no contamination between cannabinoid hemp and adult use cannabis processing activities and products at the licensing processing facility. So we will have to have a written action plan regarding that. But that's the only other business license. That's the only other business you'll be able to have on premises.
Okay.
And then we were going into what you can't have. So I wanted to mention non-cannabis derived botanical terpenes won't be allowed. So that is the exact wording they use for the cartridges. That was the last thing I want to mention.
That's strange, because common terpenes in cannabis they're not novel to cannabis, they're found everywhere. So what's the difference between if I had, because it's chemical, raw's form is a chemical, myrcene is myrcene, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering why they did that.
I'm thinking because if you look at the packaging and labeling regulations, it's really anti-anything geared to people under 21. And if you talk about some of the terpenes that people would try and bring into the market that wouldn't be cannabis derived, strain dominant type terpenes that maybe you could start getting into those flavors that may be considered marketed to 21 or a product towards 21. I think that's what it's really geared to.
That's fair.
In my mind.
Well, yeah, especially if you look at like, I mean, and no offense to anybody, but there's a lot of people sucking on those Hyde pens nowadays, and it's all cotton candy and tropical blue raspberry and all these super fun flavors. And don't get me wrong, I like to hit one every once in a while. I love a good nicotine buzz once in a while, but it's not really adult flavors. It's like candy flavors, you know. So I could see why they would do something like that.
And to be honest, let's talk about cartridges specific. I've been down in New York City a couple times in the last couple months, and I would say I saw a high usage of cartridge, so there will be a lot of sale of them in that area, no doubt.
Sure.
They're easy, they're convenient. People don't have to have the smoke. They don't have to carry the weed around with them. A lot of people in New York City are always moving about a lot, right? So I see that being a huge market for it. But I always caution people, in general, that concentration of THC was really kind of came along and started being used for people with like bone cancer and people with cancers, and rich tinctures are given to people in Asia thousands of years ago. Is where that started, those high concentration levels. And for people to make that their daily consumption of THC, I'll just warn people that there could be side effects, maybe that not so much from what you're consuming, but that concentration of THC probably maybe could have some negligible effects on your brain. Maybe short-term memory, that kind of stuff.
Especially if, I mean, if you're puffing on a distill cart that's 80, 90% all day long, I mean, that is a lot of THC. It's a lot of THC. And if you need it, you need it. But I know for me, like, I tend to, like, some people think because I have a cannabis podcast and blah, blah, oh, you must have a crazy high tolerance. Really, not really. You know, stick to flower, because a lot of times these cartridges, they really put you on your rear end. And
I'm one of the heaviest probably consumers of cannabis that I know, and I don't like them, and it's too much for me. So that's speaking from someone who can probably take 100 to 150 milligrams probably in chewables and smoke a good amount of good herbal and still not only be functioning, but probably could still go into a corporate meeting and run the meeting. And that's not underestimating what I could do probably still with it.
I believe it.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's thorough. I think this will make it so any processors that were really on the edge of being able to understand if they can make it or not, this spells out very clearly. But like I said, most people that went through a GMP audit already know most of the standards that the state just kind of reinforced through this.
I'm curious if, obviously I'm really interested in the micro business license concept. I love the craft beer and wine industry in New York. I've said it 1,000 times on the show, and I think it would be more successful with cannabis compared to wine. The margins on cannabis versus beer and wine, I mean, done the right way is profoundly impactful. And those are going to be, small shops, probably makers and family-owned businesses and all that stuff. I'm wondering to what extent they're going to hold these license holders to those same manufacturers as the processors. I would hope that it's not as intense, because most people at home, I mean, there will be some micro businesses that buy CO2 extractors and all that stuff for sure. But I'm wondering, to what extent do you think micro business licenses will be held to that same compliance and CGMP,
That's
quality?
A good question. I think this is what I'm interested in, because let's paint a picture of a couple of different product lines under that, right? Let's say you're micro licensed and you primarily want to grow good flower. You want to do very limited extraction, maybe cold press. Weed
water. Good stuff.
Maybe cold, fresh frozen, right? You can do that on site pretty easily and make some products from that.
Yeah.
What is to say that you can't have seriously something that falls within the compliances of GMP in a 500 to 1,000 foot square space? That initial investment to set up that GMP site, probably about $10,000 between the audit but it's a lot of record keeping.
Yeah.
So to me, the only, I think, disadvantage for a micro is going to be is the record keeping is hopefully you have a good product line that's popular, that can drive the cover the cost of what you're labor and record keeping will be, if that makes sense, right? So you can make one product line, still go to a processor more than likely and get products.
Sure.
And then maybe you don't have to have a GMP kitchen that's 10,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet or 2,000. You know what I mean? You can scale to your good, strongest product lines, right? Micros wouldn't be very wise to have 60 products that they're making and try and start every product line like a huge processor would. You'd be set up to fail that way. So you'd have to team up with a processor that probably create some things for you, and then you create your own. And I would say that's probably going to be the most cost effective. But at the end of the day, most micros, to me, you pretty much have to specialize in your flower first.
Yeah.
That has to be your...
I think the micro is probably is cultivation leaning. Obviously, that's where it all starts. There will be people out there who, I know people who have been making gummies for years and making cookies for years who want to do that, in the regulated market, and will probably only do that. What that looks like on their end, I'm not sure, but I do think that it will probably see, I would say that more often than not, the micro license will probably be grow focused.
I agree. And
which is great.
But I know, like, even your background, you understand how to make products. I wouldn't be able to, I could easily see you making 1 or 2 products on site to supplement your grow operation that could help with the bottom line. And then at the end of the day, you're going to have people coming in your doors, because a micro, for those of you that don't know, a micro includes where you can grow, you can make some products under certain standards, depending what products you're going to make, I believe. Because we know cultivators don't need to be GMP certified to do pre-rolls and smokable flower, right? It's going to be some kind of certification, but won't be to that level. So we got to assume then that you could do something like that as a light processing room as well.
Yeah.
Right? But 1 or 2 products would help, because also micros, the legislation's written, all the regs aren't written yet, but we believe that you're going to be able to distribute your own products out of a micro.
That'd be huge.
Right? So I could see a micro then, really, if they have a product that catches on across the state, can really
crush it.
You see?
Yep.
I think there's an avenue. The only drawback I see to any brands being built right now, and where micros might really be a great niche, is because of the limitations in advertising and marketing. Those regulations are very...
You're going to have to do it the good old-fashioned way. You're going to have to pack up your sample bags, go through the license. To all you people are going to figure out how to distribute your products. The state does a great thing where they give you your lead list, right? The first 100 licenses, every license that comes out is published on the New York State website. That is a lead if they are a dispensary. Pack up 100 sample bags and go across the state and sell your product the good old-fashioned way, because we're not going to be able to rely on social media or anything. Really, Instagram hates cannabis. Okay, Instagram is where the cannabis industry lives. Other social media platforms like LinkedIn are pretty good, but no billboards. I don't know. What about other types of advertising? What are people going to be limited to?
Oh, ready for this, folks?
Pull
No public spaces. No, anywhere where there is someone that could be under 21 years old, you can't advertise in that space. You can't go to a festival.
Unless it's a 21 plus fest.
Correct.
So does that mean you could go to a concert at CMAC and pop up a doobie bar?
That's a family venue, man. I know I brought my kids to CMAC many times under the age of 21. Right? So let's knock out any public festival, anything that isn't going to be guaranteed 21 and over. So now bars are 21 and over. Anyways, so websites that are 21 and over, so right?
Crazy.
So you have to prove that any websites you have to prove you're 21 and over. So I don't even believe personally that you'll be able to go have a website that just says, "Are you 21? Yes or no?" and going into it. I don't think that's substantial enough of a blocker for these regulations.
Really?
I swear, because it says you can have no chance of someone under 21 seeing the advertising. No free, no merchandise, no weed leaves.
You're trying to legislate out chance?
Pretty much. But yeah, let's put things in perspective, folks. And this is not an OCM issue. So I'm going to put one thing out there. The OCM, I've met several members of them, and I believe that every single one of them is trying to do right by the state and the people in the state, trying to help the social equity. I believe every person in that OCM is trying to do that every day.
Okay.
I believe that it's been described by other people that I believe that it's all these guys are facing a fire hose and the water's pouring at them right now, and some things may slip through the cracks through this regulation. That's my personal belief, because I have enjoyed every conversation with every person from the OCM I've met so far, and they've all been very, very receptive to me. So I just want to lead with that. So for them, trying to reduce harm to children from this THC, which is technically Schedule 1 federally, I understand philosophically why it's so stringent. So all I challenge is the rest of the state and the Department of Alcohol or whoever monitors that. Why don't we review all your regulations right now? Why don't we have all of you look at these cannabis regs, and let's have you take a look in the mirror? Because right now, let's put this in perspective. Under the age of 21, you have all sorts of liquor bottles marketed to you, sweet tarts. You name it. Every candy brand is on a bottle of vodka out there right now. You have all sorts of, like, if you walk into a liquor store, technically, okay, let's say I have my 10-year-old with me in a liquor store. Does that liquor store owner tell me that 10-year-old can't walk in with me if I don't want to leave them in the car? It's a hot day. So no, they're not going to tell me, right? So now that my 10-year-old will walk in with me if I allow that to happen, because the store owner's not going to tell me to stop. We walk through, that whole place looks like a freaking candy store for a kid. All the labels on those bottles, wine bottles don't, but all the liquor bottles, hard liquor, some of the new branding for the, I had a refrigerator full of craft beer. If kids walked in there, they'd be like, oh, look at all these cartoon figures, all this stuff on here. Okay, let's open our eyes, alcohol space. People in the cannabis industry bring up, yes, there's been incidents where kids have gotten into chewables and gummies they shouldn't. Gummies were brought to a school, I think it was second graders that went around and some because the father didn't handle them correctly. Yes, that is a concern. But let's not forget that same father has a liquor cabinet wide open that his kids can go take shots out of every day of the year, and nobody cares about that. Wine racks that we sell in everywhere, wine fridges, wine freezers, there's no locks on those. You tell me kids can't get that every day? Let's look at the statistics, please, of people under the age of 21 that go to the hospital because of overdoses on alcohol. Can we open our eyes? State of New York, not OCM, because the OCM, I get so I just want the alcohol industry to match the OCM, or have the OCM back off maybe closer to the alcohol industry. I don't know if that makes sense. I know it sounds silly, but the alcohol industry, wait a minute, I can watch any alcohol ad on the Super Bowl. I can watch alcohol ads on any sporting event, but there's never going to be a cannabis ad on a sporting event in New York State. You got to be kidding me, right? Let's talk about health stats. Let's go. I'm ready.
Well, it's like one thing that we know for a fact is that alcohol is more damaging to the body than cannabis. Okay, fine. I like to drink. I am a craft beer drinker. I have nothing against drinking, but that's just a fact. And why, at the end of the day, let's just call them equals. Why are we reinventing the wheel? You're trying to create a craft industry. You're trying to also build this big manufacturing and agricultural thing. Just like we did with beer, why are you reinventing the wheel on the substance that is objectively less dangerous? I don't understand. That's where I don't understand.
And now I understand that the research isn't out there, but if the OCM wanted to really find research, they go to the same place I have when I've been doing my podcast, the 70 episodes that I've done, my Hemphletic podcast.
Yeah, check it out.
I go to the Israeli studies. And I've heard it said at several events and people mimicking this. You go to Israel, there are studies up and down about THC that counteract what the potential harm is of THC. I mean, guys, there are children who take THC through asthma medications. Does anybody realize that right now? Like, let's open our eyes, folks. How about people with seizures and epilepsy? All that have been approved is epidural, I always say Epidiolex, right? And all that's a synthetic form of CBD isolate, so we can do naturally. We don't need to make synthetic forms. Like CBD isolate, we can do I don't know,
Well, I will say that at the end of the day, when there's a confusion, whether or not you like people, in the government or agree with them, these folks are, for the most part, very sharp individuals.
Absolutely.
Right? Very sharp individuals.
Every one of them.
These are not idiots. Like to run an election, or not in this case, but to get there and to be an expert and to be able to
start a department from scratch,
totally,
with no pens, papers, staplers, and working 6-7 days a week these guys are 100%. It's not easy at all.
Well, that's why, the point is that there's very smart people behind all this that's happening, right? So when there are these strange head turning regulations and rules that come out and say that just doesn't make any sense at all. And these are smart people. These aren't dumb people making dumb laws. At the end of the day, in my opinion, you got to follow the money, because at the end of every weird law and every head turning regulation is somebody who wants it to be that way. And whether it's, conflicting interests, bigger industries have a lot to, I'll tell you this, the alcohol industry has a lot to lose from cannabis, right? You're starting to see in these other states where cannabis access and adult use and medical access goes up, alcohol consumption goes down. Same with tobacco and opiates and a lot of pharmaceutical drugs.
Yep.
So there is a lot to be lost from these industries, which if cannabis was regulated exactly like alcohol and you were allowed to advertise and everything was the same, that's a huge win for cannabis and a big L for alcohol. So my brain thinks, and not to be conspiratorial because I don't really know what's going on, at the end of the day, you got to follow the money, I think. And I think that the alcohol industry has a lot to lose with cannabis coming in.
I agree. If we look at the whole PMTA process with the whole how vaping industry is being targeted right now, and Juul's going through the fight, and basically the PMTA's basically said no to every entry that was submitted. Why start a process like that if you're just going to deny everybody? It seems silly. So yeah, there's always seems to be money involved because it seems like the big tobacco companies are right in the middle of the whole thing. And Juul was seen as one of the worst offender of targeting to kids, and it was one of the biggest tobacco companies that owns Juul. I mean, nobody speaks about it nationally. I don't understand. But like I said, I'll reinforce the fact that I don't want people under 21 to consume cannabis accidentally, right? Because that's what it's about. Through studies I've seen, I don't really support people under 17 and 18 starting to consume cannabis unless maybe it'll help them with mental health issues or a physical
sleep
issue,
whatever,
or their endocannabinoid system needs to have that.
Totally.
There's plenty of people like that. I probably could have used it at 16 and 17 and would have fixed my ADD without taking medication. But generally speaking, I'm really a believer that you should start a little bit later in life because it's something you should have your whole life.
Yeah.
So make sure you're educated on the beginning and do it right. There's so many different methods to consume cannabis. It's not just smoking. You have nanotechnology, you have beverages, you have gummies, you have topicals that you can apply to your skin, and there's so many different benefits that let's not just get caught up in all the what's this, what's that. But money is always behind it. But the one thing I would say that a proof, I guess, that the OCM isn't caught up in the money thing is there was a change. So farmers originally, when they put in for the cultivation licenses, were putting in between 3 and 4 acres of land and then spreading out 1 acre of canopy out. So what that does is allow wider rows, more air circulation. The plants can grow a little bigger maybe, but your flowering canopy still only could be 1 acre.
So that means it's not. So canopy is not defined by draw a square or rectangle it's by each plant has a certain square footage?
Yep, that's correct. That's actually what canopy is ruled by, and that's by all the cultivators in their applications. That's 100%. That's the definition. Okay, so they were allowed originally to do between 3 and 4 acres. I apologize, I didn't put in for the application, so I don't know exactly. But I've asked and talked to many farmers, obviously, because I'm a processor, so it's the conversations we're starting to have across the state now to figure out what we're going to do for biomass moving forward if we do get this license. So farmers are telling me a lot of different things, but as far as that piece of it goes, they were told, I believe now 3 weeks ago, that, oh no, there's a miscommunication because they thought there was going to be an overabundance of product for some reason, because they thought people were going to take advantage of this 3-4 acres. Because what originally farmers were going to do is when they saw what they could do, they were going to run 2 waves of plants. So the first were going to be autos, which are defined as plants that are flower quickly, don't necessarily get the highest quality for smokable, usually better for biomass, but you do tend to get some smokable out of it. And then let that veg out. They were going to then pull that from the fields, and as that was happening, they were going to have the photos, the next set of flowers out there to start to bloom, and then create basically a second wave of coming into us in maybe September. Hopefully more smokable have come out of that to really fulfill the state, which we know is going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry. And 203 farms can't fill a multi-billion-dollar industry the first year. There's no way. So they then told those farmers, no, acre and a half is all you can play with. That's it. If you have indoor greenhouse, you can put some of those photos in there or use that, and we won't count that as canopy if it's indoor. So now anybody that doesn't have a greenhouse now is putting a disadvantage out of those 200. So then there was clarification, I guess, yesterday. I just heard, I don't have definitive knowledge, but it looks like 2 farmers have now validated that they've now re-expanded that out to 2 acres. So they've heard the farmers, they've listened to the gripes, they've seen what they originally approved, and now they modified backed out closer to what they originally approved. So to me, that proves a little bit more that the OCM is flexible. They're listening to the constituents, including the New York Growers and Processors Association, which is one of the groups that has really dealt with legislation from the beginning of the hemp program. And I know there's people who believe different things about this organization, but we're a member of the organization. I'm a member of the processing committee, and I know for a fact I've submitted a white paper, which was authored by 5 or 6 of us, that has been accepted by them and is now part of the provisional licensing right now. So I know they listen to us and they take our input. And this organization has been a leader of getting potential legislation to the legislators. So I'm very supportive of that. Moving forward, I don't know how the state's going to have to handle all this, but I hope that everybody kind of centers around this organization, which I believe is going to be rebranded very soon. I don't want to be the one putting the information out there, but it looks like we will be rebranding. And once that happens, I hope more people gather, especially the processors. It looks like a lot of the growers are really starting to come to it, but we want to get more of the processors involved so we can all be a collective voice for the state. Since we are the guinea pigs of the state, we need to really have a collective voice. I know I went a lot of different directions.
No. I'm just. That's interesting. I didn't know. Yeah, I heard about a rebrand. What are they? Say what you want about them. They've got a lot of stuff done. They've really led the charge. You know, the guys at the helm of that thing have been it since day one and have done a really good job. Right, super smart folks. Very. They've pretty much been, I think, the main driving force behind what a lot of the stuff that has accomplished.
I don't know if we would have had the provisional licensing platform that we have right now if it wasn't for what they did. I believe that it would have gone from the regulation to the regular regulations, and it wouldn't happen for another 12 months. I truly believe that would happen because this provisional, what's come out for the provisional, they need to clean up some stuff. This can't be the final regulations. And then sustainability is a huge piece of this, right? So let's talk about the elephant in the room about sustainability. Let's start from the grower's perspective, from who, I don't want to say the word legacy, but let's say people that have been growing indoors in New York State for the last decade, however long people have been. People have been doing it with all sorts of different kind of lighting. If we look at California, we can pinpoint specifically that California, the worst carbon footprint in California. Now think about all the things that happen in California. The worst carbon footprint is the cannabis industry. That's pretty substantial if everybody thinks about it.
Yeah, it's true.
There's no denying it. So one person on the board, Jen Metzger, is that's her whole goal is sustainability. And in these regs, there's sustainability everywhere from tracking packaging to the weight of packaging. They want to know what we spend on packaging. They want to know how many units we have on site, how many we've sold. They want to watch the whole packaging. They're going to track that data, and we're going to send that to them yearly because they really want to see how the packaging is being used and in this industry in New York. So I think that's a great thing to gather that data. I hope they use it for good because at the end of the day, increased packaging costs doesn't cost the processor or the farmer. It costs the consumer. At the end of the day, these are the costs that are passed on to consumer. So they're going to track that. I love it. They're going to track all energy usage at all of our facilities and have us have benchmarks where we need to improve on. I think that's great too. So I don't want to rush into the cultivation side. I know we need good smokable flower in New York. I know it's going to be mostly grown indoors, but I'm hoping indoors looks more like greenhouses with depth tarps, right? And minimal lighting to supplement. Obviously, you got to use lighting in the winter, but I'd like to see that be the most efficient LED lighting out there. But let's talk about a whole state now of maybe 1,000 growers, which what they're talking about, that could be that many growers in this program eventually. We only got 2 or 3 now. That means anybody not in the game now that's really frustrated, it's going to be 1,000 at some point, everybody.
Good amount.
I mean, 1,000 means everybody still out there has a shot to get in 2 years and start playing the game.
Yeah.
And there's no vertical integration, so there's no 3 or 4 companies going to take over. Like what is now happening in Oregon, almost all the small farmers are out of Oregon. We have a lawyer on our committee who's based in Oregon, is also doing work in New York, and he was on a processor call with us this week, and he was very, very disheartened regarding the state of Oregon right now. It is vertical integration, and it is down now to pretty much 4 or 5 companies owning the whole state. Mm-hmm. And that's what and just so everybody knows, let's make this very clear. Everybody at the OCM and all the legislators saved our state. Mr. Cuomo's plan was to have MCSOs come in and run our state and then absorb all that money and do what he wanted with it. For instance, we weren't going to get any tax money. This is Chris Alexander, kind of gave us a little piece of that. He was at an event in Rochester this weekend. So this is not from my mouth. This is from Chris Alexander, who is a phenomenally great man and gives a lot of his time.
He does.
It was my first time meeting him, and I say I'm going to give him all the support in the world. Excuse me. And I did hear a story where him and Mary from Rock Normal were actually met each other. And Mary from Rock Normal, Mary's last name again is
Kruger.
Kruger, sorry. Mary Kruger and Chris Alexander pretty much met each other lobbying Albany for cannabis as advocates back in the day. So Chris Alexander, who's running the OCM, actually was fighting the state against this happening. But I know this for certain. That was their plan. It was not to give the money back to the people of the state. It was to funnel it to the MCSO. So the OCM has now saved that, and they have prevented vertical integration.
Yeah, that's huge.
So I just want to repeat over and over again, that is going to save everybody in New York. And if you are a grower that has, you call yourself legacy or in that area, just start now. Start documenting your process. Get yourself ready. So when you put out an application, you can prove to the OCM that you know how to grow. Make yourself some money on the clean side for the next 2 years. Get yourself a small business. Do whatever you can so in 2 years, the OCM has no reason to turn you down for what you already know how to do well. I know. I've been a consumer of all of your products in Rochester, all the local growers. I've been consumers for many years when we weren't allowed to. And I know there's good growers here. So I want you guys all in the game. But what we need to do is make sure, unfortunately, the OCM and the right, they can't do anything about the financials because this is a federally Schedule 1 still. And
Cooney did push the 280, the state decoupling bill, which is huge.
And that saves us all some money for taxes. So for anybody that doesn't know, 280, big piece of what's going on. And the state knows that dispensary owners are going to have a challenge because their tax rate is going to be about 64%.
Dispensaries?
Because of 280E, because they can't write off one pen that they buy and none of the marketing stuff that they do, no employee training, nothing. They're going to really probably rely a lot on processors, I have a feeling, to help with functions within the dispensaries as training bud tenders and that kind of thing, and really working closely with dispensary owners. I believe I can see this already. It happened in other states in the first 3 or 4 years from what I've seen and heard from people who know much more than me. That's going to be a big piece. So dispensaries have to know that they need to do that, right? That's going to be a big piece back and forth because at 60 to 68% tax rate, your margins are nothing. You can't make a mistake in staffing like every week and have an extra 3 people.
No.
That could hurt your margins huge. And then you got to be paying these processors the money. So milligram dosage, we kind of mentioned it before. Taxes are a big piece of why this is important. So excise tax is something the consumer is going to feel at the back end, but they're not going to ever pay or actually know this being paid in the middle. So the sales tax is going to be collected by the dispensaries and then paid to the state. But the excise tax, there will be a potency tax by product. So flour, that potency tax will be 0.005 cents. For extracts, it can be 0.008, and for edibles, 0.01. That's per milligram.
And then per weight measurement, right? It's got to be per...
Total milligrams based on your test.
So if you have
5 milligrams in there,
but I'm saying, like, if you have a batch that's 20 pounds, whatever the batch size is, and it gets passed at 17%, you're only paying 1 cent tax on the whole. It does the math
per gummy.
What about
1 cent per gummy?
Per gummy, and then what's I guess I just want to know, like, what's the unit for flour?
So for instance, that would be 5 cents a gummy tax. That's a cent.
Oh, it's per milligram.
Yeah, per milligram. So that's 5 cents per gummy tax.
Right. But how much is that? Like 1/8 of flour? Is it
So
1
that's
gram of
0.008.
flour?
Yeah, that's per gram.
One
all this
gram
is to
of
1 gram
flour.
of flour. So 1 gram of flour is 0.005. It's not even 0.5%. It's a little less. It's not.
So on
0.005.
every gram of
All right,
flour.
it's 0.5%, and a check's a little less.
Okay.
I'm saying it wrong. Sorry, I'm not a mathematician in any way.
No,
I
flour
don't
is the
pretend to be.
lowest, then extract at
And then edibles the
0.008,
highest.
and then edibles are the most.
Yep. So excise taxes are going to be a little less for processors to have to pay. So the excise tax will be paid by the cultivators that are selling product directly to dispensaries and the processors. They will pay those excise taxes, which will then be built into the product final costs for the consumer.
So if you're just a producer, retail obviously is where you get whacked pretty hard. What are the all-in taxes on being a manufacturer? And I'm assuming that 280E applies to manufacturers and cultivators just the way that it does to retailers, right?
Yeah, luckily our company is very well suited where we have purchased most of the equipment under the Cannabinoid Research Hemp Program. So we didn't have any 280 issues. So our intent was we knew that was coming. So all of the equipment in our facility is paid for.
Smart.
Yeah, we didn't want to have any huge costs that we would have to then not be able to write off down the road. So we're very fortunate that way. Not every processor has that latitude, right? So let's think of any processor who's not set up in the state right now or only partially set up. All the equipment that they purchase moving forward, unless they can hide it some kind of way with their accountants with another company or something, which I'm sure there's some way that accountants are going to try to be crafty about all this. But fortunately, our company, we didn't want to have to go in a position where we had to try and be crafty, like having another company buy a piece of equipment and sell it to us or give it to us on loan or something. We didn't want to do all that nonsense, so we bought it all up front. And so we're not going to deal with 280, but every other company, 280 is a huge deal because let's talk about the cost of processing equipment, folks. How about if someone hasn't bought an HPLC yet? An HPLC is a potency testing device that is in labs. Well, you're not allowed to do your own third-party testing, but any processor that doesn't have an HPLC on site to be able to test potency, they're putting themselves in a serious risk of wasting batches. And if I was a farmer, I probably wouldn't want to work and put a brand through a company that doesn't have the ability to test potency on site. And I'm not saying that because we can, because I'm not the only processor who can. I'll name 3 or 4 right now that can as well. But what I'm saying is, if you're relying on someone to make a batch for, and then have someone to come to pick up that test and send it for potency, the way the new lab regs are set up, pretty much what happens is you're going to have someone that comes to your facility, grabs a random sample of whatever you want to send to the lab. They're going to take a video of themselves grabbing out of your batch, bring it to the lab, and then it will be tested. So that's going to be a 1 to 2 day process getting it to the lab. Right now, Talon Labs in Long Island takes 10 to 14 days for any test to go through there. There's currently 3 labs in New York State, ACT, Talon, and I don't know the name of the third one off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but it's on Long Island. So there's 1 in Albany and 2 on Long Island. Also, Kecha Labs is pretty much set up in New York State, but waiting for all their certifications. And when they have another lab, Certainty Analytic Labs out of Rochester, who we've been diverting many people to because she's building her resources to grow her lab, and we're praying she gets up and running soon.
Yes. Quick shout out to Dr. Brandy Young, Certainty Analytical Labs.
Yes.
Brilliant, awesome woman. If you are a farmer, if you are a processor and you need lab testing, call her.
Please.
Seriously.
Please. She needs money, and we need her on board because that lab would be about 4 miles down the road from my facility, which means think about this process, everybody. Everybody talks about what the hang-up in the industry is going to be, and everybody's talking about every which way. Lab testing is going to be the hang-up. So think about this. 3 labs are going to probably start. If the other 2 are up and running, or 3, hopefully they are. If they're not, that's 3 labs that now one of them is 10 to 14 days, and their sales manager is good, and they're doing that as fast as they can. As soon as they add the weight of 200 farmers and 20 to 30 processors for every batch of every product you make, I could almost guarantee that our first lab tests probably are going to take a month to come back, where now with the lab we use now for our CBD products, we look at maybe 5 to 7 days, maybe. And that's only because of the mail to get it to that lab, and really, and they're phenomenal. That's Kecha, who's also establishing in New York. So I
used to use them for Nestiva, my CBD company. They're great.
Anybody getting into the game, just a quick heads up, you really want to focus on what lab you use. And if the lab will not talk to you about sample prep, you don't want to use that as a lab.
Yeah, it's very important.
If they want to talk about proprietary methods, that means they want to test one way, no matter how you're going to send your product, and then your milligram dosage will be based on the way they test your products. And
it all needs to be the same. We need a standardized lab testing.
Yeah, and that's something that the New York is going to try and do through the testing labs and regulations. I haven't read it myself. Our chemist on site has. He's happy with the way it's written out. Actually, he didn't have one comment for me really negative towards the way they were written.
Nice.
So I was actually impressed by that.
Dr. Seth.
Dr. Seth certainly. He was. He actually was pretty satisfied with them. So now me with the labeling and packaging regs, I got some issues with some stuff. But like for instance, the New York State symbol that they're choosing has to be 25% of your label. So you could have two sets of labels though. You could have your retail label, which is on your product itself, and then a marketing label. So let's say you have a tincture. So on the tincture bottle itself, you could have some information. And then on the actual outer packaging, that would be considered your marketing layer. So between your marketing layer and your retail layer, there's some mandates they're giving. But if you don't have a marketing layer,
layers box.
Yep.
And the jar inside is your retail layer.
Correct.
Okay.
So marketing layer, if you are making products without a marketing layer, so most chewables, you wouldn't want a marketing layer, just one. You have to fit a lot of information, which basically leaves you, percentage-wise, I don't know exactly, but I'm going to guess around 38% of label for you for your logo.
Not good.
Because of all the requirements, such as the nutritional panel, the yellow warning box, the 25% of the label has to be covered by the New York State symbols, which is a 3-tiered symbol, which is cute, but it's just a little too big. There's some issues there. I mean, you're pretty much looking at a kind of a pharmaceutical grade bottle with very simple packaging. You can have colors, but not any that appear neon. And the fact that it doesn't say neon and appears neon is a little concerning. But I know we'll get this clarification. So the thing is, we'd like to order packaging soon. So I hope clarifications come soon.
I just feel that you can't regulate out everything. No matter what you do, there's always going to be things that slip through the cracks. There's always going to be people that break the laws, and there's always going to be people that consume too much or leave their shit out, with their kids on. It's the same people that leave their guns on the coffee table or leave their bottle of liquor or their drugs on the coffee table. And before you know it, you got a hurt kid. And you can't fix stupid. And there's always going to be people that break the law. And I feel like it...
Well, it's not break the law. Sometimes it's ignorance.
Ignorance. That's
right?
what I meant to say.
And I like to put it in this perspective for people. I was a journalist. I went to school for journalism. So when I came out my first 12 years, I was a writer for newspapers. And when you go to be trained as a journalist, you get taught you're writing at basically a 6th to 8th grade reading level.
Yeah.
Because that is the general public. So it was put in my mind very early in life that where I am education-wise was already going to be over the average of the average American.
Wow.
Just coming out of college. So I already had that. Most people maybe would just blow that off as, 8th grade reading. Okay, whatever. But I actually took that as holy smokes.
Yeah.
That's also the general education of majority of the people in the U.S. That's why I never really joined. I'm proud to say, I love to say this every chance I get, I'm an independent. I've never been a Republican or a Democrat in my history. Because as a journalist, I always felt like you can only be an independent to report on what's happening in society, to do it right.
That's kind of scary and sad, that statistic.
Yeah.
You've had quite the career, though. Jeez.
Yeah, a lot of different things, man. I've been very lucky. I think 4 different careers at this point.
I think that's why you offer such a unique and approachable perspective on the space, because it's complicated and it's robust, and it's very complicated. And I think that's why, I'll call you a couple times a week just to talk, because I like your perspective and I like where you come from, and I like how your brain works. And you do take these overwhelming, complex topics and make them digestible, which is a real skill. I have a couple of teachers in my life, going back to kindergarten, first grade, who I swear just knew how to teach me and things and being able to teach stuff like that, I think is just the best gift. So
it's all perspective too, though, because my business partners will tell me I'm the guy who says the sky is falling, right? I'm the sky is falling guy.
I think that comes with being a compliance officer,
I
right?
kind of have to be, right? Like if they're not, someone kind of has to be in the room, right? I try not to be too ridiculous, but it was funny though when the regs came out today. I was kind of looking at them going, I called that, and I was like, all right, I was on the right path. Like I kind of knew a couple ways they were going to go with a couple things. I really didn't expect the labeling or the marketing and advertising. I really didn't expect it to be that crazy, but to be honest, I already knew you had to do this a different way to get your markets because the consumers can't really drive the market. Because how are they going to communicate? They're going to tell the bud tender that, hey, I want this product line in here. So at first, how are the consumers? Everybody's like, consumers will drive the market. Well, eventually they will. But in the first 2 years, they're stuck to whatever's they see facing them because they're not going to see a lot of advertising and marketing from us.
I, as a business owner and as a marketer at heart, I am excited about that because you're gonna have to get creative, and you're gonna have to, I come from an e-commerce background. Before I got into cannabis and CBD and podcasting, I was in e-commerce, right? I was in men's clothing for a while. I was in info products. That's where I got it all. And if you learn how to leverage if you have a product like cannabis or like cannabis, and you could use the Facebook or Instagram or whatever platforms to market through to an e-commerce website, the game's changed. Billboards, the game. So now we're going to have to go back to door knocking and phone calls and good old fashioned sales. And honestly, I love that because you're going to see who wants to win. You're going to see brand teams out there hustling, going all across the state. I like the challenge.
That's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be brand teams out there, which is going to be very interesting. I was interested to see the first big brand show, MJ Unpacked, and how many brands from out of state were there that weren't even interested to talk to processors yet. That was very intriguing to me.
Really?
Yeah, there was a room of brands at MJ Unpacked in New York City, and I think ultimately several of us in the industry kind of said that specific type of show was probably 2 years too early in New York, but only one brand did its homework on all the processors in the state. One out of the whole group, and they reached out to us to meet. We had a great meeting. They're good guys, but we're looking to grow New York wealth, so we're really not looking to bring an out-of-state brand in right now into New York.
Yeah, which is huge because you could take them all probably.
Well, not them all.
A couple.
I know that we are one of the people probably that is leveraged pretty well, but I also know that success is fleeting, right? Like you're only as good as your last day. So every day is about moving forward and making sure we do it right and having good relationships, right? So one of the things I've heard from being in the industry, and my partners have been very nice to allow me out to go to all these industry events and trust me religiously, which is great. But what I hear constantly is people worried about New Yorkers not being able to obtain wealth and being part of this industry.
Yeah.
So I know us as a company, I'm very happy because my business partners are all Rochester, New York, born and bred, and they want to reward New York brands. And Zach Sarkis will tell you, that's for some people that's a fleeting dream. And I love Zach on the agriculture side and everything he's done with Hemp Lab and worked them to the library. So I love giving him his plug every time.
Sure.
And I'll listen to that passionate man anytime. But he says, maybe processors selling people that is a little pipe dream for farmers. And he's right in terms of how hard it's going to be to market. A farmer can't think he's just going to be a farmer and then it's just going to sell for him, right? So he's actually has to almost spend just as much time marketing as farming. Because the processor is not going to do that because the processor is busy enough making the products, paying the taxes, getting the transportation. Because the processors also have to get the transportation to dispensaries. Sure. So really, if a brand wants to start, they got to really be on the front end and the back end if they're a farmer, right? And that's challenging. So we want to be there to help those farmers. Like I was a little bit, I was naive, extremely naive, and I'll admit it. When I'm wrong about something, I have no problem admitting it. I thought more farmers are going to be prepared to pre-process their own pre-rolls and eighths and quarters this year and halves. I didn't anticipate that they wouldn't have the money to set up those rooms without the license in place because of the seeds and all the other expenses they have. They really don't have the time now because now they've planted and they don't know exactly how it needs to be clean or certified. So we're going to be there for those farmers, but we don't want to continue to have their business and hold them hostage. We will then help them set up their clean rooms, help them maybe source packaging eventually, teach them how to do it, So that's what we philosophically, I like to make sure we put
Yeah.
out there. That's what we're looking to do.
Yeah, I really I got a lot of respect for your company. You guys, good, smart group of forward thinkers there. Good entrepreneurs, local people. I think you guys are going to be a serious force to be reckoned with. I'm excited for you.
It's fun. It is
Good
really
people over there.
18 years in the post office. When I left there, I felt like I was a person filling a seat for them. And now I can't wait to get into work every day. And sometimes I have to pry myself out. If I don't have things going on at home, I pretty much don't want to leave unless I have to take my uncle home and not leave
Yeah.
him dragging him.
Yeah.
So my uncle works for me, like
Well, I think
works
you've
our
kind
building.
of become the face.
It's
When
good.
I think of No Wave, I think of Brian Lane. I mean, you're everywhere. Everybody knows you in the industry. You know the law better than freaking anybody that I know. And the regs, like you're out there. You're making all these relationships. I mean, you have a serious responsibility now for this company because you're the face.
I'm glad you said it that way because I'm very nervous every time I go out because my business partners have been so successful with all their businesses. I don't want to insult them or make them look bad, right? And I'm the newest man to the team, right? So I'm still kind of sowing my oats a little bit with them, right? But at the same time, I appreciate the fact that they trust me and put me out there in these positions. And I like to learn it. And I guess one of the skills I have learned, and I got to say it's probably through my journalism, I'm a good root cause analyst, right? So I go out and I can pick through the nonsense pretty easy. I mean, sometimes you don't make every right call on what's going to be good or not.
Sure.
There's no way you can do that. But I read energy pretty well, and I'm a voracious reader. So for anybody out there that needs some advice, read everything you can. Just so everybody knows, this is all the regs that have to do with processors. With me at all times, highlighted, written up, and it's not ever with me because if someone's asking me questions, I'm going to actually have reference. So to me, that's came from my journalism days. If you can't start from fact, you're starting from fiction. You're done. You're
a good source. I appreciate you.
No, and thanks for having me on. I
Thanks so
appreciate
much
you,
for
man.
coming on. It's always a good show. I wish we could talk all night.
I know. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you. Everybody, my good buddy Brian Lane, the compliance officer from No Wave. Keep an eye out for them. Big things coming for the No Wave team. I really appreciate your time as always. It's always fun.
You're good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to our friends here at Rockbox Recording and Production in Rochester, New York. They are a full professional podcast and video studio designed by a radio guy for podcasters. Audio, video, voiceovers, editing, whatever. Mouth off at Rockbox at rockbox.com.
You can follow Cannabis Cum Laude on LinkedIn and all other social media platforms, as well as Cannabis. And if you'd like to help support the show, search up Cannabis Cum Laude on Patreon. And of course, all of those links are in the show notes. Thanks for watching and listening.